Hello guys, welcome to CodeTech. In today's video, we're going to see what is Auth2 and see how login with Facebook works. So what is Auth2? Auth2 stands for Open Authorization and the current version is 2.0 and hence the name Auth2. So from this we know that this has something to do with authorization. But who is getting authorized here? So this is nothing but the authorization between the services. So authorization in very basic terms is it is a process of giving someone permission to have access to something. But here since Auth2 means the authorization between services, we can rewrite this as the process of giving any third-party application permission to have access to another application. So let's understand this with an example. Let's consider a scenario. So let's say a user has to sign into an application. So a typical sign-in form would look like this, which would prompt the user to enter the username and password. And once entered, these credentials would be sent to the database and they'll be saved in the database. Say a hacker hacks the database and all the passwords are exposed. So many people reuse their password and it's very common because not everyone can remember the passwords that they've given for each website. And this becomes very easy for the hacker. He can use this password to log into more critical websites like Gmail or Facebook. So this is not very good situation. So now let's see what we can do to overcome these problems. One is making sure that the users don't reuse their passwords. Now this is impossible. As long as people have to create different accounts all over the internet, they will reuse the password. So this is definitely not a fair ask to the users. The second problem is storing the password securely in database. Now this is on the developers. It is the developers' responsibility to protect the passwords. So generally the passwords are hashed before saving into the DB. So the developers need to apply this hash function on every password that is being received. They also need to add the salt to the data and also understand or also protect the data from any of the man-in-the-middle attacks. And they also have to consider any other security aspects. So the developer who is building this app should also be a security expert now. And that is like a lot of stress on the developers. Auth2 comes to rescue and Auth2 gives a better way. So let's take an example of Spotify app. So a login form of Spotify app would look something like this, where the user can enter his username and password to log in, or he's also provided with an option to log in with Facebook. So once the user clicks on login with Facebook, he will be redirected to the Facebook page where he can log in with his Facebook credentials. And once the user is authenticated by Facebook, it will be redirected back to the the Spotify page. So this feature is known as Auth2 and the previous two problems that we saw is now solved by Auth2. That is, neither the user have to create a new password for Spotify app nor he has to worry about reusing any existing password because now he will be using his Facebook credentials to log in. And also the developers, they don't have to worry about the security aspects that is revolving around the handling of passwords. But why did Spotify developers choose this approach? Instead, Spotify could have created its own login form and prompted the user to enter their Facebook credentials there and pass this username and password to the backend service of Spotify and make a call to the Facebook API. Sounds like a good approach, but no. Let's look at its drawbacks. Now, there are two big problems with this approach. One is users don't trust Spotify with their Facebook password. What if Spotify tries to store this password in some database or writes it to a file before sending it off to Facebook? And what if it again gets exposed to the hacker? Secondly, users don't want to let Spotify do everything. So Spotify's main role is to play only music. So if the user is giving the Facebook password, they are allowing Spotify to gain a complete access on Facebook. So what if Spotify starts writing something on the user's wall? What if they start sending spam messages to the friend list of users? So users don't want all of these things to happen. Again, Auth2 gains an advantage here. So once the user is redirected to the Facebook page and he enters the username and password there, the next page that he is redirected to is something like this, where the Spotify app is asking the user's consent to get these details from Facebook. That is the email address, basic profile info, or contacts. Now the users can they can choose as to what Spotify can access from Facebook. So in this way, Spotify does not have a complete access to users' Facebook data, but rather a limited access to it. So users can pick and choose what he can grant access to from Facebook. Now that we have seen what Auth2 is, let's see how it works internally. Let's consider the same example of Spotify app, which provides an option to log in with Facebook. And once that is clicked, it will be redirected to the Facebook page. And along with this, Spotify app sends some additional details. That is the client ID, redirect URL, response type, and the scope. So, in an Auth2 terminology, the Spotify app is called as a client application and Facebook is called as the Auth2 provider. So, client ID is a unique ID of this Spotify app. So, in order to get this client ID, Spotify app should have registered with Facebook much ahead of time. Redirect URL, it tells the provider where to be redirected once the authorization portion is complete. The response type, this tells the provider what the Spotify app wants back. So normally this can be a token to indicate that it needs an access token, or it will be a code to indicate that it needs an access code. Next is scope. Scope, this tells the auth provider what the client application wants to access. So once the authorization portion is complete from the Facebook end, it sends back the access token and refresh token. So now after this, everything revolves around these tokens. Spotify app stores these tokens. So from next time, the second time when you try to log in or when you launch the Spotify app, you will not be redirected to Facebook page again for the login, because it already has the access token with it. And if the access token is expired, then it can use a refresh token to get another access token.